actually at Craig Powell's suggestion several years ago, it was before COVID. And there are some things that you could transfer over to Sacramento. And let me also say that I've been to probably 19 or 20 cities in which I visited the homeless programs, as far as Dublin, Ireland, to see who's doing this right, who's doing it well, what can we replicate. And I'll tell you one thing, no one's doing it completely right. And nothing is completely replicable to Sacramento, because there's always differences in governance, in culture of a city, and one key component is real estate. We have looked and looked and looked to try to find a place to put something like a Haven for Hope in Sacramento, but it's a very difficult thing. It would have to be a large parcel. It would have to have minimal impacts on the surrounding neighborhoods. The success for Haven for Hope is they have 32 to 36 nonprofits that are located on site. That would be a very difficult thing to do in Sacramento, where our nonprofits are fragmented throughout the county. So there are some things I want to take away from Haven for Hope and replicate here, but to say that we would just do a Haven for Hope model here in Sacramento as it is in San Antonio, that's really not realistic. I am going down to Orange County because there's another program they have that's called Be Well, that has more participation from the healthcare providers. I'm going to be going down there with Supervisor Desmond. He and I are going down on a fact-finding mission. It's a mission. It's Orange County, but we're going to go down there and see what they're doing. I'm hearing that it may be even more replicable in Sacramento and particularly with the new partnership between the city and county, than Haven for Hope. I haven't give up hope on the idea of doing something like that, but it's not going to be exactly what you see in San Antonio.
Thanks for answering that. Just a reminder for everyone on the call, if you have a question, you can use the emojis to raise your hand, or you can type directly into the chat. I see we have a question from Kirk. Kirk, go ahead. You're on mute, Kirk.
Yes, thank you, Ignacio, and thank you, Patrick, for your attention to this. My question is a couple. What is the timeline for developing the MOUs, which are really the action items on how to hit the ground?
Well, Kirk, thank you for the softball, because actually I was the one in the 2x2 that told staff, okay, if we're going to do these MOUs, I don't want to hear county and city time, because we're government agencies and we work on a different timeline than you and I. And so the regular city county time of getting these things through is not going to be acceptable. And I have the word of the city manager and the county executive that no, once we have this first one done, once we have this partnership agreement done, and we have a basic template of what these will look like, it will be tweaked for each site, but it's not going to be a whole new process where it has to go through legal review and it has to go through departments. We're not going to get that. I said, that's going to be unacceptable. We need to have something that's done quickly. And they have both committed that it will be done quickly. So we're talking about in a matter of days, not months.
Yes, and Patrick, we do have only two types of shelters now, don't we? I mean, fundamentally the turnkey hotels and the camp shelters and RV shelters like at Miller Park. There's not much in between yet, is there?
There's not. What there's going to be, and this is what I try to get across to people, is there's got to be a parallel approach to, we can't build our way out of homelessness. We can't program our way out of homelessness. It's got to be a myriad of options that take care of it. I'm not going to take my eye off the ball on long-term permanent supportive housing for those that need it, or long-term housing period and affordable housing. I just broke ground yesterday on a project I've been working on for years that will offer low-income housing, permanent supportive housing for homeless people, which full services, as well as 18 homes for low-income folks that can have home ownership through Habitat for Humanity and Sweat Equity. So that's really a continuum of permanent housing options that I'm going to continue to work. I've got 2 more projects that are coming online. So that's going to be probably 400 units just in South Sacramento alone, of really well done units. But we also need to get people off the street as soon as possible. For humanitarian reasons, but also we see what they're doing to our public spaces. We see the crime that's being committed, and it's unacceptable. So we have to look at this as a parallel approach. We look at permanent solution here, but you continue to get people off the street today. And to get people off the street today, there's not going to be one solution. You're going to look at safe parking. I can't speak to, by the way, with any great, I don't want to get into great specificity on the city's shelters at this point. Probably more appropriate I let them do that. But I will tell you, overall, we're going to have safe parking places, safe places for tents in circumstances. Those are, to me, those are not the first solution, but the last solution. I'm probably going to have in District 2 in the unincorporated area, not in the city. I'm going to have the first tiny homes project in the county. I may have the first 3 in the county in South Sacramento, and those will be those pallet homes. They're not tough sheds. They're a step above that because we have to have sanitation, we have to have plumbing, we have to have electricity, those types of things. We're not just warehousing people. We have to put them in shelter with dignity. So it's going to be a myriad of those things. Right now, you are correct. There's only, and I will say in the city of Sacramento, there's only camping sites and some proposed parking sites. I think that we have to allow for those because it gets people off of our residential streets, gets them out of our parks, gets them out of public spaces. But we need a better solution than those 2 solutions. Yeah, you're right. It is going to take all of those things. We currently don't have them. Part of the problem, and again, I won't speak for the city, but I do know because we all, see the same stuff, is that they're having a problem with locations. We have had a problem as the county and the unincorporated area with locations. I have called for a public hearing to vet all public land in the county of Sacramento that the county owns and operates, owns or controls. I want a full audit because we have a great deal along the Bradshaw corridor that would not impact neighborhoods. It would be surrounded primarily by county offices and departments, so that we can put them there. So I have a feeling that we're going to be able to place a great number of, and we're looking at pallet homes as our first solution.
Right.
But there's going to be a myriad of choices.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I want to be mindful of time. I know we have one more question before that. To close a loop on something you mentioned about going to see the projects in Orange County. I'm born and raised there. I have seen a transformation. Could we get your commitment to get a write-up after you've done your visit with some of your key takeaways that you can maybe share with the LPCA? That would be terrific over email. Thank you.
Would love to do it.
I'm going to hand it off, and maybe if you could just a few minutes, maybe 2 minutes. I think there's a question from Anthony Thomas. You'll need to unmute yourself, Anthony. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Ignacio. Supervisor, please, first of all, thank you for your time, sir. And please excuse if you covered this, I came on a little late, but I had heard that there was a suit from the county against the city surrounding the Howe and Fair Oaks homeless area. One, is that suit real? And number 2, if it is, what's the progress and what do you anticipate insofar as not so much the outcome, because the courts would handle it if they're dealing with that. I just want to know the status of it, if that suit is actually still in the
Yeah, there is no suit. That property is city property. It belongs to city parks. It was kind of a parkette before it became what it is. It's a serious situation. I will say that the city and county has a slight disagreement on the interpretation of the Boise decision, in that we're a little less hands off. But that's a legal interpretation that we haven't quite come to agreement on. But there is no suit, won't be a suit. We stand prepared and ready as a county to provide services for those people when the city calls us in and asks us to do so.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you so much, Supervisor. We appreciate your time this evening. All
Is that
right.
it?
I think so.
Okay.
Look
Well, you know what?
Oh,
You know what? I have one more question. One more question quickly, Patrick. I know,
Yeah.
just quickly, I want to know. I've seen that there's over 2,000 services in Sacramento. If you go online, you go on Ask for It, then I know that they're very different. There's churches, there's nonprofits, that sort of thing. When you talk about services for the homeless and for other people in need, are you looking at partnering with groups that they do have beds, they do have particular programs, you know, sort of figuring out who has what and connecting people to those? You know, is there a plan to think about that?
Well, most of the services, when I say services the county
Mhm.
provides, most of those services are actually provided by community partners.
Okay,
So we already do that.
okay.
We of course have our own social workers and our own clinicians and all that, but we also we partner with a lot of nonprofits, community-based organizations. I'll give you one example real quick before I get the hook. Is you know, I recently negotiated to get 66 more beds from the Salvation Army,
Okay,
and those will be, you know, they'll have shelter, meals, and also case management. And I negotiated them down to $45 a day per person. That's unheard of. And I did that because I fostered a relationship with them over the years, and I ring bells every Christmas. And so we actually we're already doing that. And I appreciate the question.
thank you, Patrick.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you guys. I appreciate you letting me squeeze in here, and I look forward to continuing to serve you in the future.
Appreciate your time. Chris, did you want to hand it off to Craig? I see he's on now to resume the normal agenda, or did you want to move to someone else?
How about if we move to our speakers and then Craig can speak after that? How's that?
Sounds good.
All right. So Kevin McCarty, are you here on the call?
He's still not on. Once the next presenter starts, I'll try and give him a call because he's not responding to my texts.
Okay, Sydney. All right. It looks like Dennis Rogers with Rick Jennings group is next.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me time to speak on the council member's behalf. He wishes, doesn't wish he could be here. I need to be honest. He's in Houston, Texas, visiting his 96-year-old father. So he and Cassandra have gone out to Houston. He and I talked on the phone earlier, and has spent a lot of quality time with his dad, and the house is full of family and friends, and he sends his best wishes. Just really quickly on the homeless discussion, I know that there was a question about the city's shelters, and we have a myriad of them. We have Project Room Key, which is different than Home Key. I know it's Home Key, which is different than Room Key, and that's the more permanent supportive housing where you purchase a hotel and actually provide services there. We have that. We have the Sprung shelters, both in the Curtis Park, Oak Park area, the WX, and then also in Meadowview. We have beginning to do some safe parking. I'll come back to that a little bit more because I think it's illustrative of kind of how Rick approaches things. And then we also have some sanctioned tents areas in Miller Park. At the end of the day, we're going to need to be able to provide a significant number of units to meet people where they are at the time, and hopefully encourage them to take advantage of services as they progress through the system. So one of the things that Rick really felt compelled to do was look at safe parking. He was introduced to it. We went and toured places in San Diego, San Jose, Los Angeles, and Santa Barbara. And one of the things that was very instrumental in kind of educating Rick's thinking is a lot of difficulty in the homeless arena is getting people to accept services. So when you approach them the first, second, third, fourth, you know, it could be any myriad of times. Sometimes people are not receptive. And a lot of that has to do with where they are at the time. And what really kind of instructed Rick and kind of how he's trying to approach homelessness is that he feels very strongly that there has to be wraparound services in any sort of facility that he's going to be involved in that will be in his district. And those wraparound services has to be in a place where you can slowly and methodically move someone into a receptive position. And so the example that we use is that we went out and toured some safe parking places in San Jose. And those programs were 90 days. And they were able to get people into just a parking lot. There was a parking lot that was across the street from a park that had a restroom. and it was across the street from a community center that was a full service community center. It had a library, it had community meeting space, it had a gymnasium, it had showers, it had everything there. And so that was kind of a unique situation. But what was important about that is it's similar to what Supervisor Kennedy stated. The nonprofit that was providing the services, what they articulated very clearly to us is that it took somewhere between 60 to 90 days to get someone, once they moved their car and start taking services and start parking there, to get to the point where they would be open to moving to the next level of services, to moving into a shelter or supportive housing. And kind of the takeaway from that was, if you look at a lot of folks that are unfortunately homeless and have been homeless for a period of time, they have some level of behavioral health issue. And at times, they also may have a substance abuse issue. And that substance abuse issue is typically connected to some sort of self-medication, right? They're using it to make themselves feel better, whatever it may be. And what the research showed, at least what we did in the safe parking, and why the safe parking works for people that are living in their car, is if you can provide a place where someone can come in the evening, park their car, feel safe, get a dinner and a breakfast the next morning, get services, have some level of community, but most importantly, feel safe enough that they can go to sleep. And I don't know about you, but if I've gone 2 or 3 days where I've had late nights and early mornings and I haven't slept very well, my thought processes aren't that kind of like right now, I'm stumbling over my words, but they're not as sharp as they could be. And what in particular San Diego, Santa Barbara, not as much as LA, because the LA facility was relatively new, and San Jose showed was, once they were able to stabilize those folks, because they were able to sleep, because they were able to eat, because they were able to regularly bathe themselves, because they were regularly able to use the restroom without fear, and then start to get the wraparound services, they had a 80 to 85% success rate to move someone from the car into the next level of service. And so from Rick's perspective, when he looks at anything related to homelessness, he wants to take that same mindset, which is, how do we get people stabilized and put in a place where they can move to the next level to be able to be successful? Because as you well know, there's a female that has kind of set up residence in one of the bathrooms in Land Park, and we got a briefing on her because we're trying to figure out how we might be able to help her. And she's been 5150'd. She's gone in and out to shelters, won't stay in shelters. She views that restroom as kind of where her home is, and she's got behavioral health issues. And so how do we kind of work with someone like that we don't quite know how to get there? And so that's one of the questions that we're asking staff right now, is in situations like that or any other homeless stuff situation, how do we make sure that there is an opportunity for people to gain stability and be open to accept services? And so that's kind of the information, or the way that Rick is kind of informed in all the homeless discussions. He also then has a strong held belief that we have to be able to manage any of the impacts that's happening from the homeless on the surrounding area's quality of life. It's unfortunate that folks are homeless. It's unfortunate that the folks are hurting, but at the same time, we have to do better at making sure that we manage the impacts to neighbors, to businesses, to whomever else it may be, the parkway, whatever that is. We need to be compassionate, but we also need to keep our eye on the ball, that we can't just, not follow through on cleanups, on trying to work on managing the impacts as to the best that we can in the framework of obviously the Boise decision and some of the other issues that are there. And so I just wanted to touch upon that. Rick is not part of the 2x2 with the county. In the configuration of his old district, we were very fortunate because of being pretty proactive in the very beginning. We didn't have a lot of encampments that kind of gathered steam. The one encampment that we had that was kind of near Pocket Greenhaven down off of Meadowview was actually in District 5 at the time. And we worked with Jay Shanier's office and slowly but surely wound that camp down. And if you go out there now, it doesn't exist. And it took a good 6 months to be able to work with those folks and to be able to find shelters for them over time. but that's kind of how he views the homeless side of it. And so kind of to then transition into the main point of what I wanted to say on his behalf is his number one issue is how does he make it better for people from the quality of life perspective? You know, what can he do to make sure potholes are filled? What can he do to make sure that the grass is cut? What can he do to make sure that we can find additional resources to take care of, you know, additional hours in the library on whatever that is? How do we help small businesses? You know, any of those types of things. That's really kind of his focus as a council member, is that he recognizes that at the local government level, that's the area where he can have the greatest impact. So that's what he focuses in on, is customer service. You know, the thing that Supervisor Kennedy talked about, you know, just trying to make sure that if there's an issue that we work cooperatively with government partners and with staff. He's very big on the whole team approach. But at the same time, he's not above asking a simple question, which is, I'd like that done sooner. How does that happen? And then being quiet and just listening and hoping that people understand his point, which is you need to come up with a solution that's quicker. So with that, just as brief as I could be to talk about homelessness, which I think is very difficult. I'm happy to answer any questions. What I will commit to you, if I don't understand or I don't have an answer for you, I'll go find it and I'll get it back to Christina so that she can distribute it.
While people raise their hands, a reminder, you can paste it in the chat or use your emojis. I'll say a follow-up there. I just congratulate you guys on thinking about Safe Park. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the kind of people that, might be fortunate enough to have a vehicle are the kind of people that could really use some services to get them, rehabilitated. Hopefully gas prices come down because we won't be able to get very far these days.
Yep.
Thanks for that. Are any questions?
I do have one. Yeah, I agree with everything that Ignacio said. I'm really excited to be working with you with the Land Park Community Association. Is excited to be working with you this next year and for the years to come. So my question is this, regarding law enforcement and people that are sort of gravitating towards safe grounds and who are causing problems, whether it's drug dealing or criminals. What is there something that you're advocating for, or how are you partnering with law enforcement to make sure that the people who are in need and trying to get back on their feet aren't being put in a position where they're being tempted or they're dealing with people who just want to cause them harm?
So the good thing is we have Captain Monk and Lieutenant Kinney here, and they're experts, and we've been very lucky in the 7th District. We've had a series of captains that have really been outstanding. And I think that Captain Monk follows in their footsteps. Both of the captains that we've had prior to Captain Monk have gone on to become deputy chiefs. I anticipate Captain Monk will end up becoming a deputy chief at some point because he's that kind of person. And Christina, the way in which we work is that Rick is not someone, and if you followed him at all, you don't really see him kind of out front on anything. He does all of his work behind the scenes, and he does it all in partnership with people trying to make sure that we're all successful and we all work together. Because in his mind, one of the things that's incredibly important is durability and sustainability. And you don't get that by charging in front and bringing people with you. You do it by working with them and walking side by side so that everyone achieves the goal at the same time. And so when we go to law enforcement, the first thing that we do is sit down and listen. And we ask the questions, and we have a monthly meeting with Captain Monk where we go over everything that's going on in the district. We review crime stats, we review hot areas, and kind of, I'll give you an example of kind of that partnership. And it's something that I give Captain Monk the huge amount of credit for. As you well know, there was a shooting off of 10th Street. Not that long ago. Unfortunately, there is a duplex over there, kind of by Sac City. The front part of it was rented out to a mom who has, some family member that was gang affiliated. The shots happened. We worked with Captain Monk. We used the JFN process. The landlord was contacted immediately. Pressure was put on the landlord. They ended up not renewing the lease within, I think, a week or maybe a week and a half. The unit was cleared, the locks were changed, and that situation was taken care of. That was not because we got out in front and said, oh my gosh, something happened. That's because we asked Captain Monk a simple question, which was, what can we do to support you? So in any of these instances, Christina, where we might have that, our approach is going to be going to Captain Monk and saying, what we're hearing is X. So let's just use your example. We're hearing in this encampment over here, there's some difficulties associated with that. We would bring the Department of Community Response and the police together. And Rick's simple question would be, what do you need? What do you need to be successful to make sure that that's taken care of? And then we'd work with him to be able to do that. You know, and he's had a pretty good track record of working with law enforcement the entire almost 8 years he's been in office.
Thank you. Collaboration and partnership is key, and I really appreciate that approach.
Thank you. I see we have another question from Kirk. Go ahead, Kirk.
Yes, Dennis, it's good to meet you.
Nice meeting you, sir. Well, sir.
I've got two questions. They're both regarding the general plan update process, which is, you know, the foundation for all of our land use and development law here.
Of course.
And so my first question is how you view scheduling. I understand that there's no state mandate for when the general plan has to be approved. So my question is this, twofold. One is, do you think it should be voted on by the existing council members, including 3 or 4 that may not be with us beyond this year? Or should it be voted on by the new group of council people that will be responsible for its implementation over the first 4 years of the plan?
Well, you know, I really appreciate you giving me a humdinger of a first question. That's the only way that I can answer that honestly is I haven't talked to Rick about it, so I don't know where his thoughts are on it. But since it's a 20-year plan, people will have an opportunity over the 20 years to do that. And so the last plan was updated, I think, a little over 20 years ago. And Rick came into the last 8 years of the implementation, including some rather significant development in the southern part of his district with Delta Shores. And so I think that our system currently is set up so that as schedules are made and agreed to and votes happen, there's a recognition that the general plan, while at the time is to be implemented, it also has some level of ability to be amended in the future, and future councils can amend the general plan and can change it if that is necessary. What I'm happy to do is ask that question to Rick when he gets back into town and get back to you, Kirk, if you'd like me to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis.
Yeah,
I would appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. The general plan is updated every 5 years. So there is a chance to update that later. Let me ask a follow-on question.
Okay.
And that is, we have been challenging the city's strategies that they've put forward for increased densification in our neighborhoods and other strategies that they've had. And the city has come back stating that they're developing 5 studies to answer the various challenges regarding gentrification, emergency access, sustainability, parking. These are all potential negative impacts for the strategies they put forth. They've indicated that we will get the answer to those studies, but it may not be before the council is asked to vote on this. So that just seems like it's a little backwards. Might you discuss, just bring that to the council members' attention too?
So it's gentrification, parking, what are the other 3?
Well, there's gentrification, emergency access on old traditional streets for increased densification, parking, and sustainability. Like, you know, should we really be planning to increase 55,000 houses when we're in a drought crisis? Things like that. So this is the studies that are coming back. The question is, shouldn't we have answers to those studies before we ask the council to approve the general plan?
Okay. Yeah, I'll find out. And just,
Great.
Kurt, one thing I just want to remind you that we have to do, regardless of drought or not, is the regional housing needs allocation, the RENA numbers that come out
Yeah,
once every 8 to 10 years. We have
Yeah.
to plan for that regardless if there's water or not. We don't get we can't say, I'm sorry, we can't do it because it's not drought. Primarily, that is a zoning code. That is a zoning exercise, right? Making sure there's enough available land to be able to do that. And I just want to
understood.
say that because, Rick's asked to write articles, and the Sierra Curtis Neighborhood Association asked us to write an article. And the article that was written this month was about the drought that's coming up and making sure that people are trying to be as conservative, if you will, with water as possible in the upcoming year. And so he's well aware that that's an issue. But at the same time, sometimes we have conflicting and competing interests from a
Sure.
state, federal law that we have to follow through regardless.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your answer, Dennis. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Kirk.
All right. Any other questions for Dennis before we move on to the next speaker?
Just that, I wanted to add on to something Kirk said. I've been really concerned. We already have an absence of tree canopy in parts of the city. And a lot of what's being discussed to do is going to hugely impact, particularly when we talk about both drought and removing tree canopy, the livability of the city. And many of us have been working for more trees in the south area so that it looks more like the older neighborhoods and different things, and to make it more livable, to make the temperatures better in the hot season, and to clean the air and all the wonderful things it does. And a lot of the planning is very clearly not taking that into account at all. In fact, it's counterintuitive. So that's I don't know if that's part of the studies that Kirk was talking about, but that really needs to be addressed, not in the process, rather than, well, we'll get to that later, which is the answers I've been given in the past. So
Beverly, I took your name down and I wrote down tree canopy issues. And so we have monthly meetings with the community development department. And so I will bring this up and add it to the agenda for Mr. Jennings to follow up. And then we'll get back to Ms. Rogers with the answers that we get from them.
Sorry, I'm going to interject. I would echo what Beverly said, but I think go beyond tree canopy. It's creating tree canopies where there isn't any in like South Sacramento and those areas as well, not just replacing the deteriorating canopies. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Any other questions, or we can go to the next speaker? Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate you being here and getting back to Kirk and others with their questions.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. I'm thinking, Christina, do we want to go over to Assemblyman McCarty?
Yes.
Welcome, Assemblyman. You're on mute if you'd like to. Yeah, there you go.
I'm on mute. Okay. I can't see everybody. I see the agenda. Is that how you have it?
That is intentional. You could probably select
Okay.
for it, yeah, at the top of your screen if you wanted to see everyone's camera.
That's okay. I just want to make sure I see you
All right.
and who's all here. So thank you for your patience. I'm, as some of you know, I have little kids at home, so juggling a school night, homework, and cooking dinner. So Zooming at the same time. But I enjoyed the presentation from Rick about those, from Rick Jennings' office, and Dennis Rogers there about some of these city issues. So I had a presentation that I was going to go into about, issues that I've been working on and the budget and land park and so forth. But you know what? I just want to nix that, and in the interest of time, get right to you. So I'll let you ask your assemblyman any questions you want about, the budget, land park, the gas tags, housing, whatever. I know you all are really very well prepared on your issues. So let's just get right to the Q&A.
All right, that's awesome. I see Anthony has his hand up, but let me ask a question if I may before Anthony. I'm curious what your position is on Assembly Bill 1771. Are you familiar? Are you following that?
I'm not. And first of all, my staff says you can't see me. Can you see me in my video?
We can see your background and your face comes in and out on occasion. You might want to get closer to the screen.
Yeah. Okay.
You're pointing the camera, Kevin. It looks like there was a bowl of bananas on the counter. I think you need to flip the camera
Oh,
around.
I need to flip it. Okay, let me flip. How about, how about there?
There you are.
There you go.
There I am.
There it is.
Good work, Sydney, figuring that one out. So I guess the question, so Assembly Bill 1771 would essentially impose a 25% tax if you were to sell your property within 3 years of acquiring it. There's a lot of implications.
Oh, it's the Ellis Act update.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what your position is on that.
Yeah, I supported that for two reasons. One is I am a rental property owner, so I understand this firsthand. It's not an abstract issue for me. We own 4 rental properties. So this is our retirement portfolio and our kids' college fund. So I certainly get it. I voted for it because I think that it really does a couple things. Really, it deals with some of these corporate land speculators who are just coming in and buying their house and trying to flip them and kick out their tenants. It focuses on, making sure that it's for, that's after 5 years. But more importantly, it really is not a Sacramento issue. It's only related to cities with rent control. Some of the rent control cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, only half a dozen or so in California. So it wasn't an issue that impacted my district, but overall, the philosophy they were trying to address, I supported it. And I think that you can have a rental market and respect property owners and return on investment, and also make sure you have fair policies to make sure we don't have people getting evicted and ended up living on the streets. So
I appreciate it. I wasn't aware that it was limited to cities or jurisdictions with rent control. So thanks for sharing that. I wonder if there's any conversations about also creating an exemption for folks in their primary residence. Imposing this on people with secondary, third, and fourth homes, I think is more palatable. But as the language is written right now, would also affect anybody who is buying their primary and maybe has to relocate for work. So to be taxed at 25% seems like an unconscionable penalty. So just I put that bug in your ear.
Yeah, let me look into that. I think there are exemptions for primary ownership. So I'll go back and take a look at that.
Not as drafted, but that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good question.
Do you want to go to Anthony Thomas?
Sure. Thank you very much. Member Bill, you may be a little more familiar with your bill. And I believe it's 1928 or is it 1958? Your rerun of the bill that was vetoed by the governor last year.
Oh yeah.
And the health, approaching the homeless piece as more of a health crisis. Can you give us the status, the outlook of it? I know you've enlisted some other counties to assist with broadening the appeal of it and bringing in some more advocacy on that behalf. But how's it looking, and who's the opposition this year?
Yeah, well, good to see you, P. Anthony. I will say that's an important bill for California. It's a pilot project for just a few counties. Right now, it actually doesn't include Sacramento. I'm thinking about putting Sacramento in there. It's just for Yolo, Santa Clara, San Joaquin, and Contra Costa. And then the notion is we should focus more on drug treatment as opposed to incarceration for people that are arrested for crimes and their underlying crimes related to a drug addiction. People, come out of prison, they're sentenced sometimes better drug addicts than before. So the idea that I had is similar to what we had in the drug court system, where it's an incentive for the individual when they're sentenced to prison or a state term for the county jail system to go, serve time or go to drug rehab in lieu of. So it's not like these individuals will be going home either way. They're actually sentenced for a crime, not a drug crime, mind you, any other underlying crime that they are convicted of that they can show it's related to drug addiction. It sounds like a common sense bill. When I explained to people, it passed the legislature by 70-1 vote last year. The one guy who voted no, I asked him, he voted no on accident. So the bill was vetoed by the governor, unfortunately. So no, sometimes people, get it wrong. I think in this one, the governor got it wrong. I will note that the status quo, as you all know, in Land Park, in some of these areas, is not working on these issues. We need to think outside the box. This is one that I'm, proudly doing so. And we'll be back with it this year. And I hope that we will be able to convince the governor to sign it. I will note that he's talking more about these things with conservatorships and other pieces. So I think we have a better chance.
And first of all, Kevin, thank you very much. I think this is one of the most important pieces of legislation, not only in the legislature today, but that you've had since you've been in office. Who's our opposition on the bill?
The opposition, ACLU and other groups. So, I work with them on other issues. I think there's just this philosophy that this should be 100% voluntary, that coercing or enticing someone to get drug treatment doesn't work. And that's why this is a pilot project. It's a pilot. We test it out because we want to see if potentially it could help people when they're sentenced to get treatment and get better off for themselves and our communities at the end of the day.
Good seeing you, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, I see two hands up. Kirk Viberg, do you want? Actually, just Kirk. Did you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you very much. And I appreciate, Kevin, your attention and awareness regarding this issue of Wall Street investment firms and outside investors buying homes and trying to basically get control of various rental markets. I was curious about your understanding and position on the local, that situation that is local. For example, a Blackstone investment group has bought more than 5,000 single family homes in Sacramento County. And they're going to gain control of the single family home rental market. This kind of monopoly purchases, it seems like it was exactly what the Ellis Act was sort of designed to prevent, but it's happened anyway. So what do we do about that?
I've seen some of those proposals, and we had this in 10 or 20 years ago up in Thomas, and a lot of the houses that were being foreclosed and not taken care of at the beginning of the last mortgage crisis were these corporately owned ones. And granted, individual homeowners have problems too, but it was an issue that I saw firsthand when I was on the city council. Yeah, but I do think that it squeezes, people that are trying to get in the home market when you have these, big national REITs pulling their money in corporate home ownership, and that has an impact. There's another issue that I'm concerned about on the housing market too, is not just the corporate ownership, is the sales that are with the internet buyers, where people are able to sell their home. Like let's say a corporate entity buys this and they want to sell through a real estate entity that is through online. They don't have a local realtor. Then there's no one, watching the house. Squatters show up. This happened over here in Tahoe Park. As you know, if you ever talk to a realtor, they know their listings. They know the streets. They know what's going on. They know the flowers in front of their houses. So if anything's happening, somebody calls that number and it's taken care of. But if it's some of these internet listings, sometimes, that never gets addressed. So I have a bill that would tighten up that issue to protect neighborhoods.
Is that open listing? Sorry, but are you referencing to like open listing? And
yes. Yeah,
okay.
I forget the name of the company. Yeah.
What's your bill called?
I don't know the number. It's on my list. Maybe Sydney, my staff, can pull it up.
Or post it in the chat, Sydney. That would be great. Thanks.
I don't always remember the numbers, but I remember what they do. So
that's fair. I mean, we pass so many laws in this state these days.
And sorry, just to be clear, what bill number am I looking for? Open listing?
Yeah, it's the one. Yeah, to open listings.
I think it's called, on my sheet, it's called iSale something.
Perfect.
All right, I see Beverly has her hand up. Go ahead, Beverly.
Hi, I just thought that it might be nice for you to talk a little bit about educational issues and those particularly impacting Sacramento, because you have some good reviews on the work you've been doing. So I'm curious what's going on that's impacting Sacramento that we would like to hear about.
Yeah, yes, good question. So, most legislators have a primary assignment, most of them, as far as what they work on. So my primary assignment at the Capitol is I chair the budget committee overseeing education funding, from early learning to K-12 schools to higher ed. And so it's not always money, as you know, the issue, but I will say for our public schools, this is the highest per pupil funding we're having in the history of California, in large part, and I'm not surprised no one's asked about taxes yet and the gas tax and so forth. The economy is booming. We are seeing multi-billion-dollar surges in state revenue with a surplus north of $40 billion. After this pandemic, this economy has exploded like never before. And as you may know, half the money roughly goes to our state school system and our public colleges. And so we're able to do some pretty amazing things to bring up support and expand programs like, universal pre-kindergarten program, universal pre-K, so everybody can go to preschool for free, regardless of a waiting list, regardless of their income, which is big for, low-income families on waiting lists, but also great for, Land Park families that can't afford to pay $2,000 a month for preschool. Literally costs more to go to preschool than UC Berkeley. So that's one of my big efforts that we got taken care of last year in the budget. My bill was signed into law. The overall health of our school system, schools are run locally, like Sac City and Thomas, Elk Grove, and Twin Rivers and so forth. So, they're dealing with their own, governance of it. But I will say the overall fiscal health of our schools funding is outstanding. So, we shouldn't have as much strife in our schools as far as funding. And I know we read about that in Sac City. Another big priority for mine is higher education and colleges. One of my top priorities in higher ed is expanding access to the UC and CSU system, especially for California students. At the UC, we've been hearing for years about, out-of-state students and international students having a better shot at getting in than Californians. I did legislation on this. We're able to be successful to dramatically expand in-state tuition at UC Davis, UCLA, and all the UCs, as well as at the CSU system. Community colleges is always a great deal. We've furthered our programs to make community colleges free for everybody that wants to go full-time, so free community college for full-time. The big picture about college is, college is a ticket to the middle class. We get that, but it's also so important to our economic future. All our employers are saying, hey, we need more college graduates. We need more educated workers. You see, these analyses all the time. So that's the number one thing that we can do to help our economies focus on education. So, start when they're young, because that determines, frankly, the impact of how they're going to do in life and school. In life and then in the classroom. So early education really matters, but I want to make sure we focus from the beginning all the way to the end in education. Thank you.
Can I just add a kind of follow-up question?
Yeah. Yes.
I know that there has been expansion of the vocational programs for young people, many of whom don't see a path with a 4-year degree. But one of the things that I keep running into talking to repair people and different things, that a lot of people that population is aging. And when I talk to them about why they're not taking on apprentices, they say it's really expensive to train an apprentice. So as you're approaching your retirement years, you can't necessarily afford to take on apprentices unless there's some sort of support system to help ensure your apprentices make a living wage. So is there anything, to me, this relates to education, even though it's not specifically that issue. Is there anything in the state that's being considered to help young people who could work, could go from schools into apprenticeships, and that could work with these really skilled and highly in demand people working in the trades?
Yeah, I would say two things. I didn't mention all of our great work in education, but one thing we are doing is just that. We call it now career technical education, CTE. And those, as you know, you make more as a plumber than you do as a teacher or a nurse or even a lawyer sometimes. So they're good jobs in there. And we need to make sure that we support those CTE programs because we have, a big gap in the people in those fields. So, 2 years ago and last year we followed up, we essentially doubled the amount of funding that school districts like Sac City have for CTE programs. Sometimes you see these analysis as far as earmarks are not good for the budget process, but I'm proud to get earmarks to help my district. So I got an earmark to help Land Park, for example, for Fairy Tale Town. We also got an earmark to help create a CTE program at Hiram Johnson High School in a neighborhood in my district to create one last year. So I'm doing these same things. And then lastly, the apprenticeship piece is something we're trying to make sure we do on major projects, especially major projects funded by the state or with our state money to be able to expand apprenticeship programs. Because not only does it help what you said, it gives people in certain communities sometimes an opportunity for economic expansion that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
I see we have Craig Rutledge, our president's hand up. All right, Craig. Oh, there he is. All right, maybe Craig is working on something.
Am I there now?
There you go, Craig. We can hear you.
Okay. So my question is, I appreciate everything that you do with the, especially the education to get people. And you're talking about all this funds that you've received, all this money. I have heard this from the governor, all this excess money. Where is that money coming from? Who is paying that money? Where are we getting all the extra funds that we didn't have years ago to do these programs? Where is it coming from?
Yes, hold on 1 second, Craig. I'm not ducking you. I'm turning my.
No, that's okay.
I'm turning the pasta. Turn the pasta off for my kids. So I gotta take care of two things right
That's
now.
okay. I got dogs.
Where's
My
it come
kids
from?
are gone.
It comes from us. It comes from the people of California, businesses of California. I will say in this particular acute issue, where it's coming from is the super wealthy. I'm not sure if that's you, Craig, or me, but people making 0.5%, like super wealthy tech billionaires and people cashing in on the upper income brackets of California. So that's said since two things. One, we got to be careful because we can't count on that money being forever. So we have to use a lot of that money for one-time things like infrastructure, saving for the rainy day. I'm going to get to this now about yet with this tax rebates and the gas tax. We are going to be able to do a lot with one-time money. So I have a bill. Speaking about housing, I have a bill that would spend $5 billion, with a B, on building more student housing around mainly UC and CSU campuses, but could be at community college level too, to help with the student housing shortage. And that helps students afford college, but also helps with these communities that don't have enough housing that are squeezing, that have an impact. You may have seen that decision with Berkeley recently, where some people sued, they wouldn't enroll more students at Berkeley. Well, the underlying issue there was we weren't building enough student housing. So I'm working on that. But the overall tax issue too, and this goes to the paying at the pump, and I get it. I went to filled up my truck the other day and it was $100 and it wasn't even full all the way. So, we get it. There's a big impact on inflation costs for, people in our communities. And so part of this infusion of money is we're going to do, targeted tax rebates to people this year in this year's budget. We don't want to just willy-nilly decrease the gas tax because, one, we're not certain if it would get to you. Oil companies set the price, right? So we decrease the gas tax by 3 cents per gallon. That's the one that's going up this July. It'll on average save you 30 something cents per trip to the tank. And over 8 times of the year, that's quite significant. But is that going to get passed on to you? I don't know. You know, gas prices are set on the larger market. So I'd rather have a direct check to our voters. So we're going to be doing just that. So stay tuned. There's going to be some big news in the state budget this year about, with the infusion of one-time money, to having some targeted tax rebates out to send to the people of California.
Yeah, so I guess my biggest thing is, we already know there's a lot of people make money here. A lot of people in California. What about all the other ones? I'm just trying to figure out, you may give them a tax break, you may give them something. What are we going to do for them?
For what people?
The people who are not making the money, who are not doing like we are.
That aren't paying
I'm
tax.
talking about us.
Yeah. Are we going to increase taxes? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't want to. I want to know what we're doing for the other people.
What other people? I'm sorry, I'm confused. Sorry.
Okay. So I just know that when my kids were teaching school, all the other people were having a difficult time making their lives and doing things. I want to know, I guess what I'm trying to say is, our state, number 5 in the world, whatever you want to call it, however you want to set it, what are we doing for people who need help?
Yeah, good question. So one thing I really like is the program like the Earned Income Tax Credit to pay people for work who work, you know, low wage workers. Because let's face it, you know, you could be here in Sacramento and have a job, work full time. You didn't have 3 full-time jobs to afford a place to live. So, you know, squeezing out people who are working hard. You know, no disrespect to people on public service, but these are people not on public benefits. They're working and they're still getting squeezed out. So one thing I think we're doing is having a more progressive tax system where we do tax the people well off a bit more and provide more support for the people who are working poor. And so we're going to do, we've done that. We'll probably further expand the Earned Income Tax Credit through this budget process. I think we need to, things that we're doing, like making early education free, after school programs, more higher education. So that is a targeted and direct help to families, but also helps our economy. But yeah, I think when we do these tax rebates, we're going to have some type of means tested to make sure we help the people that need it the most. Because while it's true, the majority of this infusion is coming in for people at the top level. You know, we don't want to send it back at that level. We want to make sure that we, you know, focus on the families and the people and the resources, the programs that need it the most.
Perfect. You just answered my question.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Kirk, I see you have your hand, but I'm wondering, I know we're really pressed for time. Can you maybe just try to keep the question and answer here pretty succinct? Go ahead, Kirk.
Sure. Yes, thank you, Kevin. I wanted to ask you on the state housing bills. One is called the Housing Crisis Act, which got the state into the housing business the last couple of years. One of the aspects of it is that they indicate that when a city adopts state mandates, that they can't roll back density once they've increased the density, allowed higher density housing in any given area. So it's no longer a trial. There's no beta testing on all of these plans. So I wanted to know if you would consider supporting a sunset for that, so that if there were unintended consequences or negative impacts, we could stop that program. These programs end in 2030, but we can't correct any of them. They will be perpetuated because we can't correct it.
Gotcha. Well, you can always correct it by introducing a new law. That's what you can do. But what you're saying is the impact will be there for generations. What happens with it? I'm not familiar with the actual proposal or law you're talking about. I can certainly research it. But on a broad perspective, I don't serve on the housing committee, but I vote on all the big bills that come to the floor votes. And overall, I am 100% pro housing and trying to expand home ownership in California, rental opportunities. You know, I'm concerned about, like, my staffer on the call right here, Sydney, you may have met. You know, she's in her, 20s, college graduate, people coming back home to Sacramento who have good paying jobs, can't afford to buy a house, can't afford housing. And so that's going to impact our long-term viability and competitiveness in California. That's a big issue. So whether they're reducing barriers for housing production, or providing resources and incentives, I'm doing that. One thing that I'll mention, I talked about this morning downtown with some of our downtown leaders, is I'm concerned downtown what we're going to do with workers who are working remotely, like we're doing right now. The nature of work, may be here forever, of doing this, back and forth from home and going to work. So are we going to need all those state buildings downtown? I don't know. So I'm looking at legislation and money in the budget to help as far as convert some of those state assets downtown to housing. Because if you look at the core of downtown, housing is needed. If you look at Midtown during all this pandemic, Midtown's thriving. You don't see as much. There is, other than negative aspects you see in downtown sometimes with, homelessness and so forth, and, chronic behavior down there. You don't see as much in Midtown because you have activity, people living there. So I'd like to see us, really step up and how we can do that in the central city. So that's another one of my priorities.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And any way we can support you on those commercial reuse programs you want to promote, we're with you all the way.
Great.
That sounds great. For those of you who are going to be listening to the recording, just so you know, Sydney did post into our chat that the bill that the Assemblyman was speaking to related to open listings is AB 2224. Thank you so much, Assemblyman Kevin McCarty and Sydney, for answering questions on the chat. I appreciate your guys' time, and looking forward to reconvening with you at our next community meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, Craig, back to you, buddy.
Sure. So I guess we should just.
Wait a minute. Hold on, guys. Don't we have Captain Daniel Monk and Lieutenant Brian Kinney on the call?
Yes, we should go with that. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Well, good. What a good meeting. I've learned so much already, and I'm thinking about what am I going to talk about. It's been very informative. And the one thing I would say is that we're very lucky to have Councilmember Jennings and Dennis Rogers in this area now. I will say that they are doers, and upon taking over the area, we had a meeting and they asked me, hey, what are some of the biggest concerns or issues that you're hearing from the community there? And I thought about it for a minute, and I said, well, probably traffic and homelessness and the use of the park and cruising. And I got to tell you, they keep my calendar full with lots of meetings with various stakeholders here in the upcoming weeks to try and to work on those issues. And they've been very active. So we're very lucky to have them. So Brian and I are going to sort of tag team this tonight and talk about a couple of things. For me, I was going to start it off with the cruising. As we all know, there's been some concerns about various issues like the traffic and the noise and the roadway usage and all those things. And Councilmember Jennings has already been working on this issue as well. He and Councilmember Valenzuela organized a meeting with the Lowrider Commission a couple of weeks ago, and you may have seen it on the news. I got the opportunity to be there along with Chief Lester and Captain Hansen, who's the downtown captain. And really from that meeting, what I heard is that they want to be good partners. They want to have their events without having any negligent circumstances with the business community or the residential community, and they're really open for suggestions and feedback. And so there was a cruise, I think it was probably 2 weekends ago now, and they reached out afterwards and said, hey, what are some of the community complaints that you're hearing and how do we fix that? And so we continue to have ongoing discussions with them. Myself and Captain Hansen have a meeting with some of the commission members again tomorrow to talk about how we can work together to really try and utilize and make sure that the space is available and open for everyone. But the business community along the Broadway corridor isn't impacted like it was a couple of weekends ago, where there was just so much traffic that it really caused some significant delays. The parking lots were full, where businesses weren't able to get customers in there, and the noise and just sort of a variety of issues. And so I'm really hopeful that we will all come up with some solutions that will benefit, not just the Broadway corridor, but the park and you all and the business community. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Brian. I know he wants to talk about a few things, and then we'll open it up to discussion.
All right, well, good evening. And for those of you who I have not met, it's nice to meet you. I put my contact information in the chat. So if there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to reach out. So kind of along the same vein as the cruising on Broadway, I was going to talk about Land Park itself and specifically the Panhandle. So as most of you were aware, starting on February 27th, City Parks had been looking at exploring a temporary closure of the Panhandle on Sundays, basically running from February 27th through March, just kind of as a trial period to see what that would look like in regards to addressing some of the issues. In order to close any city park, they need to have approval from the assistant city manager over parks. All the right approvals had been obtained, but kind of at the last minute, there was some objections from some people in the community and some people within the lowrider community. So kind of at the last minute and not communicated to our neighbors out in Land Park, they basically forego closing of the Panhandle. So that's kind of what happened with that very first Sunday. I know you guys had an event planned there, and we were unaware as well that they were not going to close it. So it's still something that's being explored, but kind of in the meantime, we're trying to have some meetings like Captain Monk had discussed with some of our various partners, trying to come up with a better solution. I know I exchange a lot of emails with neighbors along 13th Avenue that border the Land Park, park proper. So I know this is a huge frustration for them. And I know last weekend, for example, we had some issues out there. Mainly, it sounded like some noise complaints. So it's something certainly we're aware of. We're trying to be as thoughtful as we can in kind of our approach to dealing with this. Obviously, taking into account the neighbors of Land Park, but then also everybody who's trying to enjoy the park, just not the ones causing a nuisance. So we're really working hard to come up with some meaningful resolution that's going to be really satisfactory to everybody. So kind of stay tuned. And like Captain Monk had mentioned, Councilmember Jennings and his staff are really on board with coming up with a solution with everybody. Kind of in the interest of time, I had some other things I was going to talk about, but I think we'll open it up for questions because I'm sure at least Art has something for us. I haven't heard Art tonight at all.
Okay, I'm not hearing Art, but I do have a question for you, Brian. I want to know, yes, regarding the Panhandle, a couple of things. But first of all, yeah, I've walked by there on the weekends, and there are over 200 parks in Sacramento. I know this is not anything you're responsible for, but for that one little space to have over 100 cars in that area every single weekend, it's a little overwhelming for the space itself. There are better places that the cars could probably go right now if they wanted to. I truly believe that because I've seen other parks. So there's that. But my question to you is, the noise level, like you mentioned before, is an extreme problem. I've gone by and it's ear piercing. And I know there's a few motorcycle dudes who like to drive through the park most of the weekend, and the noise is so very loud. I mean, is there some way of, just some, I know you guys are understaffed and I know park rangers are understaffed, but if there's some way of just somebody cruiser, if we're going to leave it open like that, and this is going to happen every weekend, can we have somebody cruise around just to like calm down the people that are causing the problems, that are making it uncomfortable for everybody else who's trying to enjoy the park?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. So anytime we're aware of large events like that, which really seems to be most weekends now, our patrol officers do respond through the neighborhood, and obviously as time allows, they can spend a little more time. Typically what happens though is we'll get like a noise complaint from either people in the park or some of the neighbors. And what ends up happening is once the people see that a marked police unit's coming through the neighborhood, the noise usually subsides. It's really hard for us to identify who the specific people or vehicles are causing the noise complaint. So typically what happens is once we go through, the noise kind of quiets down, and then a short time later, the noise comes back up. So it's kind of this cat and mouse game that we have. But really my best recommendation would be is if you see stuff like that, to either yourself or the neighbors along 13th Avenue, just to call in like a noise complaint. We can certainly go in, and at minimum, our presence usually helps with the situation.
That's not gonna work.
Hey,
Who do we call in for the noise complaint? Where do we call?
So that would be our non-emergency number, which is 808-5471. So that would be anything related to noise. The reckless driving that we see in the park at times would be another good example of when to call the non-emergency number.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else have a question?
Beverly has her hand up. Go ahead, Beverly.
Yeah, so I was in the park last weekend and there were quite a few cars there, and I don't mind the car folks. That's not my big, I don't have to live there, so I'm not impacted in the same way people living near the park are. But they were double parked to the extent that it was hard for me to get my little Honda Fit through. And if there's emergencies, that's a regular, it's kept open for emergency transportation, and we can report it. But these are the people that, well, I don't know if these are people that are working with, that are car club members that you guys are working with, but I mean, at least we could ticket them if they're parking 2 or 4 across on the area. So that's one thing. It would make some money, but the other thing was when we originally requested closure of the park for either, first we started with slow streets, we got turned down for that, and then it was just, we got a few days where it happened. We only asked for 1 day a month, not for 4 weekends in a row, which I understand why maybe there were concerns about that. But we never got the 1 day a month. And we're trying to get something that is regular enough that people that use this regional park can have something to look forward to that is not car and noise centered. So that's something, we're not feeling heard about. It's not just that they canceled it, it's that we've asked for less, we're given more, and then had that taken away. So I know that's not your responsibility, but it is something to keep in mind. And then why can't we have horse patrols?
So Beverly, this is Dennis Rogers. I want to chime in just a little bit. Okay. One of the things that I think is important is to create something that's durable and long lasting. And I think the way that Rick is looking at this is, how do we work with those car clubs that are wanting to be a good partner, so that we can figure out what's the best way to make sure they get permits and they know that they can't double park, and that there's adequate restrooms, and that there's noise requirements and all of those things. And then what are the enforcement mechanisms we can use for those folks who make the decision not to be able to do that? one of the things that I know that Rick is very interested in doing is working with Captain Monk and his crew, as well as the fire department, if they're double parking and things like that anywhere where it might impact emergency vehicles, to work with the police department to be able to address that. That's just to address what you said specifically. But the last thing that I want to close with is the import of Land Park is significant, not only for the city of Sacramento, not only for Land Park, but it's also a regional amenity with Fairy Tale Town, Thunderland, the golf course, all that other stuff. One of the things that I think we need to explore is, within that regional park framework, what is the Panhandle? Is the Panhandle part of a regional park? Or is it maybe something that might be a little bit differently, and maybe we need to think about from an operational standpoint, should it be really operated more like a neighborhood park or something along those lines, and that we have events and everything that happen at neighborhood scale in that area, because the streets are narrower, everything else associated with that. And so these are all things that we're talking about internally that we're going to want to be able to sit down and talk with you guys, as well as the volunteer corps and everyone else, because nothing should be off the table about how we make this very important asset for your neighborhood, for the city, and for the region function, and recognize that maybe we need to take a step back and figure out what are these impacts and where things to go. I don't by any means say that that's the direction we need to go. I'm just happen to daylighting that there are options available to us to explore that might help us understand how to operate this differently in a way that allows multiple groups to use it, but then also kind of addresses some of the issues that you just talked about, which is, how do you have a part of a large regional park that might be a little bit quieter and a lot more neighborhood focused. So I know that Rick is open to any of those things. He looks forward to having those continued conversations.
Okay.
He's working real hard to try and address it with those individuals within the car club community that want to follow the rules. And I don't know if many of you know this, but he went to the University of Maryland and studied criminology. And if he wouldn't have been an NFL football player, he would have been, a police officer, maybe the FBI or something along those lines. And so he has great respect for what's going on there, but he also is kind of a rule follower, right? If you're not following the rules, he really doesn't have a lot of time for you.
Sweet.
Okay.
I have a question. Am I on?
Yes.
So my question, I actually have multiple questions. It's obviously about Land Park, because I'm only one house in from 13th